Let's talk about 1978 for a second, because if you were paying attention to the music charts that year, you could feel the ground shifting under your feet. Punk had already happened. New wave was coming in hot, and in America, the market that every rock band wanted to crack, AOR was king. Slick production, tight arrangements, massive radio hooks. Bands like Foreigner, Boston, and Journey were printing money, and every record label in the business was chasing that same formula. Ritchie Blackmore was watching all of this, and he was not happy about where Rainbow stood in relation to it. Because Rainbow, the band he'd built and funded and controlled with an iron grip since leaving Deep Purple in 1975, was still operating in the realm of fire-breathing mythology, epic arrangements, 7-minute tracks, lyrics about wizards and rainbows, and the glory of battle. It was magnificent music, and the hard rock faithful absolutely worshipped it. But Blackmore was a businessman as much as he was a guitar god, and he could read a chart. The Medieval Castle wasn't selling tickets in Cleveland or Detroit, and Blackmore wanted those tickets. So he made a decision. He was going to drag Rainbow kicking and screaming, if necessary, into the modern rock landscape. And if certain people couldn't survive that transition, well, that was their problem. The first person who couldn't survive it was Ronnie James Dio. Now let's be precise here, because this is important. Ritchie Blackmore did not fire Ronnie James Dio in the traditional sense. He didn't call a meeting, he didn't pick up the phone. That wasn't Blackmore's style. Instead, he did something that, if you worked around him long enough, you'd recognize immediately as a death sentence. He stopped communicating, he gave Dio the cold shoulder. Professionally, completely, systematically, Blackmore had done it to other musicians before. Dio watched it happen to other people and knew exactly what it looked like. And then one day, the crosshairs were on him. When Blackmore finally did address the musical direction, he told Dio plainly he was tired of the Dungeons and Dragons stuff. He wanted love songs, he wanted commercial lyrics, he wanted something that could get played on American radio between a Journey track and a Foreigner single. Dio's response was essentially, find someone else. And that's exactly what Blackmore did. Here's what makes this moment worth sitting for a second. Ronnie James Dio was not just a vocalist in Rainbow. He was the creative engine of the band's peak era. He wrote all the lyrics, he co-arranged the music. His operatic, mythological identity was the reason albums like Rainbow Rising landed the way they did. And the moment he refused to compromise that identity on command, the moment he showed any resistance to Blackmore's vision, he was out. It was that simple. Blackmore's Rainbow, Blackmore's rules. You don't like it, there's the door. Dio walked through it with his dignity intact, went and fronted Black Sabbath, and the rest of that is history. That's another story for another video. The story here is what Blackmore did next and how ruthlessly efficient he was about it. Finding a new singer wasn't easy. He and drummer Cozy Powell sat through audition after audition, listening to tape after tape of long-haired, denim-clad vocalists who all sounded like second-generation copies of the man who just left. Blackmore didn't want another Dio clone. He wanted something different, a raw, gritty, soulful voice with a kind of power that could carry a commercial rock hook without melting into something soft and forgettable. The lead came from an unlikely source. Cozy Powell remembered a singer from the late 1960s UK pop duo called The Marbles, a man named Graham Bonnet. The Marbles had scored a top 5 hit in 1968 with a track called Only One Woman. And even buried in that Baroque pop production, Bonnet's voice had almost alarming intensity to it. More recently, he released a soulful, muscular cover of Bob Dylan's It's All Over Now, Baby Blue. That had done well in Australia. That voice, that raw, combustible belt, that was what Blackmore was after. Tracked Bonnet down and flew him out to Geneva, where the band was tax exiles and writing new material. And then Graham Bonnet walked in the door and everyone's jaw hit the floor for entirely the wrong reasons. He was wearing a suit and tie. He looked like a bank manager. He had no idea who Ritchie Blackmore was. He had no idea what Rainbow was. He walked up to the microphone while the crew tried to contain their laughter, and then Blackmore handed him his audition piece, mistreated the great bluesy Deep Purple track. Bonnet opened her mouth, and the room went silent. The voice that came out of that clean-cut, suit-wearing pop singer was something else entirely. It was enormous. It was ragged and gritty and absolutely ferocious. Blackmore made him sing the song 4 times in a row, not because he doubted him, but because he needed to confirm that a voice like that was real and sustainable and wouldn't vanish after 2 tracks. It didn't vanish. Blackmore found his man. Did it matter that Bonnet looked nothing like a rock frontman? No. Did it matter that he had to be taught basic architecture of a modern hard rock song? No. The only thing that mattered to Blackmore was whether this instrument could deliver what he needed it to deliver, and it could. Everything else was secondary. To complete the transformation, Blackmore reached back to his Deep Purple days and pulled in Roger Glover, not just as a bassist, but as producer. Glover was the right choice, and Blackmore knew it. Where the Dio era had been all sprawling neoclassical arrangements and dramatic dynamic shifts, Glover understood how to build a clean, punchy, radio-ready rock track. He stripped the arrangements down, he focused on hooks, he cleared out the sonic clutter and left space for a chorus to hit the way the chorus is supposed to hit. Alongside Glover, Don Airey came in on keys, replacing David Stone. And that mattered more than it sounds, because Airey's approach was fundamentally different from what came before. Less church organ, less classical formality, more synthesizer, more modern texture. You can hear it right from the jump from the opening of All Night Long. That synth hook signals immediately that this is a different band than the one that made Rising. Now here's a moment that tells you everything you need to know about how far Blackmore was willing to go. Rainbow had always written their own material. That was a point of creative pride. But for Down to Earth, Blackmore recorded a cover, an outside composition by Russ Ballard, a former member of Origin. The song was called Since You've Been Gone. And this wasn't a casual decision. This was Blackmore consciously abandoning the idea that Rainbow's identity required music written by Rainbow. If the best hook available came from somewhere else, he was going to use it. No sentimentality, no attachment to process, just results. The gamble paid off in spectacular fashion. Since You've Been Gone hit number 6 on the UK singles chart, got heavier rotation across Europe, started making real inroads in America. The formula worked exactly as Blackmore had calculated it would. A massive guitar riff, a simple driving rhythm, and Graham Bonnet's lung-shredding vocal turning an already strong pop rock song into something that sounded almost dangerous. All Night Long followed it up and was confirmed the new direction wasn't a one-off. Rainbow now had 2 commercially viable rock singles, something the Dio era, for all its artistic brilliance, never quite managed. But Blackmore wasn't completely scrubbing what Rainbow was. Songs like Eyes of the World and Lost in Hollywood kept a darker, heavier undercurrent running through the record, a reminder that there was still a guitar player underneath all this commercial calculation who could get sinister when the mood struck him. Cozy Powell's drumming thundered through the whole thing, the last surviving link to the Rising lineup, and that muscle that kept Down to Earth from going completely soft. The album worked, it charted, it sold, it got him on the radio, mission accomplished. But here's the thing about Ritchie Blackmore, he was never finished recalculating. Graham Bonnet's tenure with the band would be short-lived, and the commercial ascent that Down to Earth started would be handed off to someone new. A singer who would take the polished, radio-friendly vision of the album and push it even further, smoother, slicker, more melodic. His name was Joe Lynn Turner, and the chapter he wrote with Blackmore would define the early 1980s version of the band in ways that even Down to Earth couldn't predict. And that will be coming up in a future video. In the meantime, check out the Deep Purple playlist. This is all the Deep Purple story from the beginning and adjacent bands, including Rainbow, Whitesnake, Gillan, Ian Gillan Band, and other bands, Select Black Sabbath, and so on. Check it out, and I will see you in the next one.